Bueno, muchas gracias. Bendición. Bendición. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being a part of this Diaspora Summit. Once again, I want to thank Professor Melendez and the entire team that convenes us every year and organizes so many efforts to make sure that we are educated and informed on the latest trends and issues and numbers and data affecting not only the Puerto Rican community on the island, but the diaspora as a whole. And this conference is one that we all need to continue to support and be a part of and exchange ideas. Those that don't learn their history are doomed to repeat it, right? Or something along those lines. Simply put, the wealth of knowledge and experience in this room. And I'm looking around and I'm seeing some of the faces of people that when I got into politics, I heard about and listened to and experienced or tried to just carry a baton further from the work that had already been done. And when we talk about this topic, solidarity and engagement, the solidarity part, we're all here for a reason. I think we're all here because we understand the solidarity we have to being Puerto Ricanos and to the work that needs to be done in Puerto Rico as well as for Puerto Rican communities across the United States. But the engagement part is the part that I want to explore in this session more than anything else. And the panelists that we have have a wealth of experience having done this work in their various roles. And we're seeing also, and we're going to hear from Jose Luis on what the next generation is doing. And if you look at the political landscape in this country, make no mistake about it, as many gains and as much work as generations of community leaders have done, what young people are accomplishing today in this country is something to behold. I think it's a historic movement. I think it's a historic time in terms of the impact and the effect that it will have on policy and politics moving forward in a way that we have not seen in a very, very long time, if at all. And we're living those times and we have an opportunity to support that movement. And I think that's part of the engagement that I want to maybe explore a little bit more in this conversation. Very short in terms of my work. I was born in Guayama, Puerto Rico, lived in Arroyo. Papi is de Peru, so I'm Puerto Rican. My mother-in-law was Colombian. I mean, my stepmom was Colombian. My wife is Dominican. I have a mix of all kinds of things. Yo soy un confundido. Pero algo que no se me confunde es que mi primer amor, mi hogar, el lugar que me vio nacer a mí fue la isla de Puerto Rico. Mami vive en Arroyo, Puerto Rico. Como muchos de ustedes, yo pasé el sufrimiento de no saber de ella meses después de la tormenta y gracias a Dios pude ser parte de los esfuerzos que el Estado de Nueva York hizo. I'm sorry, let me go back to English. I was very, very honored to have been a part of the work that happened from New York State, working with Governor Cuomo and my colleagues in government to respond to the aftermath of Maria. But like many of you, I also, in a very personal way, just didn't know what was happening with my hometown, what was happening with my family. And much of the work that I've been doing since has been driven now by my experience post-Maria. And I think that's part of the impact or trauma, whatever you want to call it, that many of us are now experiencing as well. But with those key experiences come opportunities for significant change. And if you saw what happened in Puerto Rico with the mobilization of young people and across party lines and what effect they had mobilizing, we're seeing that also in this country, whether it's on climate, whether it's on politics and just our voting rights and every other issue that's mobilizing people, we have an opportunity like we've never had before. And I want to figure out, how do we tap into that? How do we use this window? How do we use this activism and energy? How do we use this passion that we all feel about all the things that have gone wrong and what they mean for our people? How do we now transform that into action that is going to effectuate real change? And that's what I want to explore, and that's the exchange that should happen this entire weekend, and that's hopefully what we'll all take away from this conversation. So with that, I want to first turn to a colleague of mine who, as already was introduced, represents the 53rd Assembly District in Brooklyn. She is, como dicen, no tiene pepitas en la lengua, una mujer brava, una mujer puertorriqueña que le dice a quien sea lo que piensa, but she's made an incredible difference on policy in New York State, and now as our leader in the Puerto Rican Hispanic Task Force, will convene us again moving forward at Somos in Albany as well as in Puerto Rico. So Maritza, I guess as you give a few words, but if you could just kind of focus also a little bit about your work and the engagement that you see we have had or we're having or that we need to have as political leaders in New York towards not only Puerto Rico but also the diaspora in our neighborhoods.
Thank you, Assemblyman Crespo. Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. So I just want to speak a little bit about, sometimes you have to go back into history in order to move forward. And I am a first generation Puerto Rican that came with my mom. When I was 3 months old, my mom was a teenage mom with my grandmother. We had an opportunity to get on a plane. My grandmother used to say, fue un avión de dos motores. There were two motors, like I didn't understand what she was talking about, but now I do. But nevertheless, they came here to make a better life, to ensure that they had the very same opportunities that anyone else had in the United States of America. Because back then, Puerto Rico, of course, there weren't a lot of women that were educated or they worked in tobacco farms and they did all of this really tough job. Plus, they had children, right? Like, my grandmother has 7 children. And she managed to work through all of that and come to the United States and work in a factory, although she didn't even read and write. This is how I learned how to speak Spanish and write it, because my grandmother raised me and she was like, I don't understand what these words mean. So when I was in the 2nd grade and 3rd grade, it's like I had to translate to her. I didn't do a very good job at it, but I tried. As I grew older, I became better. But nevertheless, fast forward, a lot of trials and tribulations, learning how to be a Puerto Rican woman in the United States, and trying to balance those two things were extremely hard for me. But because you're learning everything that was authentic in Puerto Rico, and now you're learning a new world, right? That says, you gotta pick and choose. I decided not to pick and choose. I decided to be both, thank God. And so with that said, fast forward, a lot of organizations did a lot of grassroots community hard work, put on my Timberlands, went to the ground. My community was burnt down, if you all know the history, because the Bronx went through it as well, 1977. And we were left with like nothing, with heroin and everything else that came with that. Our educational system was not near what it is right now. So, again, it was very tough trying to balance both. But I got through it. I got through it because I got my grandmother and my mother's genio, como dice Crespo. I have their chutzpah, their, we call them en Puerto Rico, perdona, cojones, ¿verdad? Eso es así. But, we've never forgot our roots going back and forth. My mother, they took us back and forth going to Puerto Rico and back. My eye-awakening moment, honestly, was for Hurricane Maria. Honestly. Crespo and the state did a wonderful job going back and forth and talking about it. I took a group of 22 volunteers from my district. I took backpacks. I didn't know where we were going. We got 2 big warehouses full of items to take to Puerto Rico. And when I got there, we could only bring the water because we had a hard time trying to ship it. Doesn't matter. Fast forward, we understood that supplies were not getting to where they needed to get to. That's the bottom line. That's the truth. That's my truth. It wasn't getting there. Which gave me the opportunity to go back the 2nd time and make sure that it got to the hands that it needed to get to 36 churches. We were also able to move the New York City Police Department goods because they had no way of getting into Puerto Rico. What I saw in Puerto Rico was heartbreaking. And I didn't understand why, because I went to Utuado, I went to Morovis, I got into the mountains. Again, I'm that type of girl. I will put on my Timberlands and walk the mountains. And what I saw was so disorganized. We have 78 towns in Puerto Rico. 78 towns. We have how many districts in the Assembly? What, like 65, 66? I'm sure that each of us know exactly where is the impact in our community. Where's the real crime? We didn't have information. No one knew anything. And so I said to myself, we can't continue to let this happen to Puerto Rico. We need to arise. We need to start being policy driven. You know, the Jones Act. My last conference in Albany, we had a packed room with people because they wanted to understand what the Jones Act was and how did it affect Puerto Rico. Never mind, it was signed in 1948. There has been no amendments made ever since then. There has not been there's been a lot of work, but we know that we need to we need a better educational system in Puerto Rico. We know that. We know that, right? Everybody knows that. We cannot continue to have our young people not educated. Hospitals and health. It's like going into a third world country, okay? And I love my Puerto Rico. I love my Puerto Rico. But when you go into a hospital, you have to bring your own pillows and your own, probably your own Band-Aids. It's a problem, okay? Our young people, we have the richest cultural environment in the entire world. That's why they call us Port Rich. But our young people didn't want to. Surprisingly enough, now, when I went back a couple of weeks ago, because I am planning the next conference for Puerto Rico, we are working on putting together a great panelist of education, people that work with the education system, not only in New York State, but in Puerto Rico. We're also we're having a post-traumatic stress disorder workshop, big one, because nobody knows. There is a large number of women committing suicide in Puerto Rico. Let's talk about the truth. This is the truth. There's nothing to hide. You know, we are great people, but we need to do more. We need to do more. We have our legal system there. 16-year-olds going to jail for 20 years or more because they know no other way but drugs and crimes. And when they say that our caseríos are in bad shape, I beg to differ. I used to go to Lloren Torres every day to drop off food. And they were the most organized that I've seen. So let us not kid ourselves. All they need is for us to help them get the tools that they need. And I am so grateful to Professor Melendez for his work and the diaspora. Because if we don't count who is in Puerto Rico, we don't know where these demographics are or where these little hubs are. History can repeat itself. And I do not, and I will not allow that to happen. So I thank you for allowing me to speak here today. And we have so much more to do. And I hope that all of you go home and say, you know what? Hasta una piedrita que tú cargues. Hasta un vaso de agua que tú le des a alguien. Hasta un plato de comida que le des. You can make a difference. And that's why I'm here, to let you know that no matter what you have, you can make a difference. So thank you so much for allowing me.
Thank you, Maritza. And I know there's a lot of New Yorkers in the room, but let's move over to Norman and his work in Pennsylvania and across the country. And Norman, both your work as founder and chairman of the Pennsylvania Latino Coalition, you're now heading the 2020 Complete Count Commission in Pennsylvania. Tell us about your experience and tell us how you see engagement flourishing within your communities and where you think we need to move the efforts moving forward.
Thank you, and I just, for the audience, I would like to say that I was also born in Guayama, Puerto Rico.
Así que cuidado, dos brujos en tarima.
So 50% of the people in front of you are from Guayama, which tells me that Guayama is leading the way right now.
I don't think so.
Cataño's a little jealous.
No, you gotta visit Cataño, you'll understand.
You know, a lot of them have basic Cataño. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is such an honor to be here today with you on behalf of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and I would like to have a conversation on the work that we have been engaged in the Commonwealth. And I want to give you some ideas of where we come from, you know, the Pennsylvania Puerto Rican experience. But before I do that, I think that it is important to mention why Maria now is really drafting the Puerto Rican agenda for every single one of us. Whether we were born in Puerto Rico or we were born in the United States or somewhere else. Puerto Rico nació en cada uno de nosotros ese 20 de septiembre del 2017. Y despertó un sentir, un orgullo y un amor a esa isla del encanto como nunca antes. Y nos levantó a nosotros como boricuas, que yo creo que después del 20 de septiembre del 2017, nuestra comunidad va a ser más unida, más directa, más preparada y más orgullosa que nunca antes. You know, that was the experience of New Yorkers, you know, because for many of us in Florida and in Pennsylvania, we're still New Yorkers. But the pride is no longer in New York. The pride now is everywhere, even in Massachusetts, right? Woo! So for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and when we saw what was happening in Puerto Rico, we saw an enormous opportunity and an enormous responsibility. The government, you know, in this case, the governor of Pennsylvania, I was the Assistant Secretary of State when Maria hit Puerto Rico. We got together. I got engaged with 20 plus state agencies in the Commonwealth, and I said, we have to respond, and we have to help Puerto Rico. And every single one of the state agencies in Pennsylvania, they provided support for Puerto Rico. You know, we collected millions and millions of tons of water. We collected thousands and thousands of dollars. The governor visited Puerto Rico because we made the governor accountable as well. You know, with a group of Puerto Rican, you know, when I moved to Pennsylvania in 1992, we had about 200,000 Latinos in the Commonwealth. When we count the census of next year, it's going to be almost 1 million Latinos. Most of us Puerto Ricans, U.S. citizens that can vote. And I said this in the Capitol the other day. No one will make it to the White House without that Puerto Rican vote in the United States, and no one will make it to the governor of Pennsylvania without that Puerto Rican vote in Pennsylvania. I need to be very clear about that, because I want everyone around the nation to know that this Puerto Rican community, yes, we are still humble, but we have a very precise, concerted agenda that we will no longer tolerate abuse, neglect, and racism against the Puerto Rican people. So in Pennsylvania, we brought a group of individuals together and we said, this is going to be the 10 points Puerto Rican manifesto. In order for us to move the Pennsylvania Puerto Rican community agenda forward, and I'm going to share with you briefly what are those 10 points. First, you know, and all the 10 points that I am sharing with you, they have to be data-driven, research-driven, and policy-driven. Because there's another thing that we have to reflect as a community, that we are very passionate about being Puerto Rican and helping our people. But sometimes we forget the wisdom behind it. Sometimes we forget that to have a long-lasting, everlasting impact in our people, it must be policy-driven, data-driven, and research-based. You know, and we have to recognize that. So the first one is, we have to increase the minimum wage. And by doing so, helping Puerto Ricans, you are helping every single Pennsylvanian. Number two, we have to create income equality. And you see this conversation going around the nation today, income equality for females and women, and we are all for that. But don't forget, because there's a misconception, that every time a governor Every time a CEO appoints a woman, they think that they are doing justice to minorities and to people of color when it comes to income equality. And that's why we have to be very precise. Income equality for the Puerto Rican people, men and women. Number 3, a community without history is a community without future. So if we are almost 1 million Puerto Rican and Latinos in Pennsylvania today, we must integrate the history of that Puerto Rican community into the curriculum of the 500 school district in Pennsylvania. Not only in those districts that we have a predominantly Puerto Rican community, but in districts without that community, so when we are out there, people are used to the Puerto Rican experience in Pennsylvania, and we minimize the racism and discrimination. Number 4, we must pass the DREAM Act, and in this case, passing the DREAM Act means that if you are Puerto Rican that suffer in the island, that move to Pennsylvania, we should at least give you 1 year of free tuition to attend any college or university in our Commonwealth. And that's the process. If you see what is happening in Brooklyn, what is happening in Philadelphia, what is happening in Orlando, local governments are gentrifying our communities, right? It is happening everywhere. When the white flight took place in the 70s and 80s, and all these individuals left the Brooklyns and the Phillies and my Lancasters, they left them with a lot of problems, economic problems. And now we are coming back. And now they want to own what they left behind, and we were the ones sustaining it. So we are proposing no government support to gentrification projects displacing Puerto Rican families. It is incorrect, it is immoral, and we must not accept it. Number 6, yes, we are U.S. citizens. And yes, we have been U.S. citizens before Hawaii and Alaska. And our relationship with the United States is for more than 100 years. But English is not our first language, not in Puerto Rico. Spanish is our first language, y como decía una gran amiga mía en Puerto Rico, no solamente el español es el idioma de los puertorriqueños, el español es el idioma de Dios. So we are asking the Pennsylvania healthcare industry to have mandatory class standards for all healthcare facilities. So when you go and you take care of my Puerto Rican families that are coming here that do not speak English, that you know how to treat them with dignity and respect. That's all we're asking. We are not asking for any other special treatment, but with dignity and respect. We must increase Puerto Rican home ownership in Pennsylvania. My home city of Lancaster. It is the Puerto Rican city of the Commonwealth. We are the largest population ethnic group in my city, yet only about 20% of Puerto Ricans own their own homes. That is a disgrace. And we must take and assume responsibility for it. In order for us to really say that we own that American dream, we must increase home ownership in the Puerto Rican community. Professional licensing was the point number 8. We have Puerto Ricans moving in, but then when they are trying to be doctors and lawyers and teachers and educators and nurses in our Commonwealth, there was no path forward. So we are asking the Pennsylvania Department of State, let's do something about it, and I am so glad that your colleagues in the House and in the Senate of Pennsylvania, they are passing legislation to make this a legal legislative mandate in the Commonwealth. Number 9, we have a PR campaign driving the narrative of the positive Puerto Rican impact in Pennsylvania. Let me explain, and I'm sorry that I'm taking so much of your time, but this is what we are planning on doing. If you have a Puerto Rican community in Reading, Pennsylvania, for example, the poorest of the poor, those Puerto Ricans that are moving in from Puerto Rico today, they are more highly skilled, more highly educated, and they are here, no vinieron a pasar el macho, vinieron a hacer las cosas bien. They are improving the educational conditions of all Latinos in the Commonwealth. So now, instead of us allowing the media to be the driving force behind the Puerto Rican experience, we are the one writing the narrative. That having Puerto Rican in your state is a good thing. That they are improving the social, economic, and political conditions of everyone. And finally, this is the number 10, and the number 1 in my plate in the Commonwealth. I am sick and tired of looking at numbers after numbers in state after state that shows that some of the poorest communities in our nation is the Puerto Rican community. You know, we have to assume responsibility as the leaders of this community. So something that we are telling Puerto Ricans and Latinos and the government in Pennsylvania is our top priority is to eradicate Puerto Rican poverty in the Commonwealth. If we are in the business of improving conditions for everyone, we must start with the root of the problem. And the root of the problem in Puerto Rico and in the United States for the Puerto Rican community is called poverty. Thank you.
It's a good list. And I'm really excited about this question because, again, I mentioned this, and both Maritza and Norman talked about the work they're doing and what many of us have been a part of in terms of some of these events and conferences and organizing. But there is no movement without longevity and without energy. And you look at in New York, if you look at our communities in the Bronx and in East Harlem, and you saw what the Young Lords did in their best days, we saw what the mobilization of young people in communities like the Bronx and Brooklyn and East Harlem, when they felt they had enough. I mean, you look at the history of Hostos Community College, look at the history of Lincoln Hospital. Eran los jóvenes, era la juventud, no tenían títulos todavía, muchos de ellos ahora son electos. But they didn't have that then. And yet they accomplished things that even some of us as elected leaders now struggle to achieve. And ask yourself, what was the difference? And it was that energy, it was that passion. And so now when I look at the political landscape, I'm seeing that. And you know how I confirmed it? Because how many of you have ever asked Edwin Melendez a simple question and gotten a 3-hour answer, right? You know that this guy, you know that he has so much information to give. If you don't ask the right question, you're gonna get una cátedra de 10 temas diferentes antes de llegar a tu respuesta. Sorry, Edwin. Pero yo nunca he visto, I've never seen him react with such excitement to the conversation we were having about youth mobilization today and what is happening with young students across the country, really, in the Puerto Rican diaspora. And I'm using that to preface getting into a question to Jose Luis Rivera, who is becoming a legend in my own mind, and I just got to meet him, and I feel like a groupie, because I've heard so much about him and the work that his coalition is doing. But as the founder and executive director of the National Puerto Rican Student Coalition, if you don't know the work they're doing, you really need to talk to him more than just this panel. But I'm hearing about mobilization in various campuses in various states, and it is the very young people that are leading the way for social and political change across the world. So Jose Luis, the question that I want you to elaborate on is, A, where does that strength come from? How do you continue to harness that energy? And in terms of engagement, and I'm going to circle back to another question right after this, but in the next round, but how do you harness that in this day and age to create a platform among so many major issues that are being talked about where young people are also a part of? So how does the Puerto Rican agenda within that find its path and its way, and how is your organization helping to achieve that?
Well, thank you so much, Assemblyman Crespo. It's truly an honor to be here with such amazing leaders from our community throughout the nation. We have such amazing representation. I want to thank Centro, I want to thank Dr. Melendez, everybody here for this awesome opportunity. And I want to also give the biggest shout out to the youth over there. Those are all the leaders who are So what's the key factor that's leading this movement? Well, it's the support we're getting from the experience, the leaders that are looking into the youth and are saying, you know, we're betting on the future. We're saying we see potential on this new generation that it's mobilizing. It's taking social media not only to be in the phones and to say, oh, you know, we're just looking different things and talking with friends, but we're actually reading articles. We're actually engaging, sharing. we're actually organizing, creating events, partnering with different established organizations. And so I just want to make a brief mention of someone in the audience who has been an outstanding mentor for me since the beginning, and that's Betsy Franceschini, who's all over from Orlando here. Since I began organizing in UCF, the University of Central Florida in Orlando, I had to reach out to the community. I had to see who were the peers within my community to actually get that experience, get that knowledge, get that support. And when the time came, and we created the Puerto Rican Student Association at UCF, we had to lead an effort on extending the in-state tuition for Puerto Rican students displaced from Hurricane Maria to Puerto Rico. And the first person who told me, I'm here and I'm willing to support you with the Board of Trustees, who is the entity who makes the decision of the extension, was Betsy Franceschini. So it's that type of leaders, the leadership here who believes in us, who say, here's my business card, call me, email me, you know, and we definitely, we hear, you know, that remark, and we definitely take the action that needs to be done. So just wanted to make the remark that if it wasn't for the leaders we have in the back, none of this would be possible. Our model is very basic. We like to call it grassroots. Even though it's a national movement, we focus on the local community aspect, which is the universities. We have the PRSAs, which are the Puerto Rican Student Associations at the university level, and we have different members of universities here throughout the nation, and that's how we build our strength. If we want to create a national movement, we have to be strong in our communities, and there's no other way than to partner with our senior leaders who are actually having the resources and having all of what we need to prosper as young leaders. And so thanks to Centro, we've been actually able to organize already 2 national events. One in New York City, it was the National Youth Leadership Encuentro. We had members from all over the nation, very incredibly talented young leaders, even native here from the state of New York. And we were able to actually organize, not only at the local level, but also at the state level. So now we have New York, Florida, New England, we have Midwest, and the West Side, regional boards. And the regional boards, they bring together all those PRSAs at the local level to bring them into the state level and then organize in the national level. And we do it all through network, virtual, and social media, because as the youth, that's our driver. So then that synthesizes pretty much what we do, and if none of this would be possible, it wasn't for all of you, your amazing leadership and work and support, and more than anything, thanks to Centro.
Sorry, that's it. So, I have a few questions I want to get to from the audience, and I want to ask a bit of a different question. I think we've all established now just how much we care about Puerto Rico. We've all shared our experiences, so I don't want to necessarily relive that aspect. I think we're all here for the same reasons, and we have very similar backgrounds in that regard. But we all also realize that we went through this turmoil of the last 2 years and saw incredible political and social disrespect, to say the least, of the Puerto Ricans in both the island and in the diaspora. And we all know the numbers. We know the numbers of Puerto Ricans in the mainland. We know the issues, the political issues in terms of our vote and our influence on the political process. But at the end of the day, despite our numbers, despite our history, despite all the gains we've had and all the amazing Puerto Ricans in many positions that have served and continue to serve, we were disrespected. We were treated differently. We were treated less than, and we all know that, right? Anybody disagree with that? Okay, good. So, if we all agree on that, the question for me is, how do we create solidarity that leads to actual engagement, and an engagement that in turn impacts those politics? How do we stop another Trump or another legislative leader, and I don't care if he's a Democrat or a Republican or something else, how do we make sure that no one in politics in this country is in a position to do this again to us? And so the question, and I'm not saying that if any of us had the full answer to that, we would have been implementing and discussing that from the beginning. So I guess what I'm saying is, in your own roles and in your work, how can you create that level of engagement so that we're all sort of on the same page and actually effectuating the things that we saw what goes so wrong over the last 2 years, in particular after Hurricane Maria. So, and by the way, we do want to get to the other questions, so we got to give sort of rapid fire answers to this, but what would you like to see done, or what would you do, or what are you planning to execute to create that level of engagement to effectuate political change so it never happens again? Maritza.
So very quickly, grassroots organizing is extremely important. Getting down to the ground, knocking on doors and talking to people, and saying Puerto Riqueño, levántate, you gotta go out and vote. That vote is so extremely important if we really want to make a difference. And I think we were at the same event for Census 2020. Our voting rate went up 125%. We need to do more, not only here, but in the island as well. We know that they can't vote in the island. But what we can do is encourage them to stay strong over here. Over here is our responsibility as legislators to ensure that everyone in our community that's Puerto Rican is enrolled to vote, even if that takes an hour conversation. So with me, it will always be grassroots organizing and having young people knock on those doors, get the information, give them the enrollment sheets to vote, and letting them the importance. And I think that we're at a point right now where people are just seeing the rhetoric on the news, right? Everybody sees it on the news. Everybody's disgusted. So with me, it's all grassroots organizing.
You know, we have the Pennsylvania Latino Convention coming October 29th through the 31st, and we are committed to have 100% of the participants being registered to vote. Because we believe that that's going to be the deciding factor, especially in our state like Pennsylvania, that we lost by about 45,000 votes. That vote alone, Puerto Ricans get out and vote. And we have over 250,000 Puerto Rican voters, combined over 400,000 Latino voters in Pennsylvania. If we vote, get out and vote collectively, we will really be defining who's going to be the occupant of the White House. But in addition to that, I would like to bring this even closer to the work that we do. You know, is to dare to run for office. You know, if you don't see representation in your own communities, you have to dare to run for office. And I'm going to give you an example. I ran for mayor of my city, knowing that it was going to be very difficult to win. And sometimes you have to be the sacrificial lamb in order for you to have real community progress. So I didn't win, right? But in my city, come January 2019, 4 out of 7 of the city council members are going to be Puerto Ricans. In the city of Reading, we're going to be electing the first Puerto Rican mayor in the city of any city in Pennsylvania come January 2019. The school boards, you know, school boards, they dominate more of the budget of those cities. We didn't even have Puerto Ricans elected to school boards in Pennsylvania. January comes, we're going to have Puerto Ricans elected all across the Commonwealth. So we need to do two things: register and vote, and second, if they don't represent your values, you do dare to run for office.
Jose Luis, from your perspective, same question, but I also want to just add this. In terms of the young people that are now engaging in your encuentros and participating, what are you hearing most from them about what drives them to engagement, and what do they want to go out and talk about? Because Maritza's right, we all got to go out and organize and grassroots, but you have to have a message in order to do that, one that really captivates people. So what are your participants, your members saying is that talking point and that message that is going to resonate?
So I think the strongest unifying factor between the youth is actually giving back to the Puerto Rican community within their local cities, and also not only keeping it to the city, but also how we can come together more than just me within my friends, but also take it more into other people who are doing the same work. And when you see a young person who's doing the same work as you are and somewhere else, not just within your state, but all over the country, it serves as an inspiration. And most definitely, the factor of solidarity with Puerto Rico, wanting to give back from the diaspora to the island and making a difference, Those are two definitely the unifying factor. But our powerhouse of how effective we are organizing and taking action is definitely social media. If we don't use and maximize social media, we're not going to get anywhere. We have the power of actually unifying and saying we're present with our organization, we're working together, and it's all through collaborative events, through Facebook, through Instagram. We put all of our logos together, and that's how we showcase our powerhouse. And we showcase our power together and we take action.
I just want to, thank you. I just want to add this. Look, there's everybody, we should rightfully have a focus on engagement, organizing in terms of voter registration and voter outreach and voter turnout. But it's not just that. And in order to have sustained, between elections, there's a lot of work to be done. And there are so many different ways for anybody in this room to try to really personalize this. What can I do? Well, look, if you're not engaged or don't have interest in political forums, and you don't want to necessarily do that, there are others doing that, let's be honest about our social service and our nonprofit networks. You can't look at the turnaround in the Bronx, and as much credit as elected officials and those of us in public office want to take, the reality is that the turnaround in the Bronx started with the empowerment of nonprofit organizations run by us. It was when community leaders started to bring people together and then establish themselves to draw resources to make change. They developed housing that was targeted towards Puerto Rican families to create stability and home ownership. They created healthcare networks that were bringing doctors and leaders and professionals into the communities to service and do so in a culturally sensitive and appropriate way. So we have to create those institutions and start to re-engage them and support them. And that work is not just happening here. Look what Acacia, where Raul Rusi and his team was able to do in Vega Alta, I believe it was. They developed senior housing and they brought the development models that have worked here using tax credits so effectively, federal and state and city, so effectively here. They've gone and shown how that development model can be used in Puerto Rico to create new, more resilient housing for the communities. And more of that has to happen. And if you ask Raul, he'll tell you, when he first went around, he fue a 10 municipios y todos le dijeron que no. Porque no entendían lo que estaba pidiendo. Until the mayor of Vega Alta, who was a younger, more progressive mayor, said, I get it. What do you need from me? Just give me some land. And they gave him the land, and he brought the tax credit. He built an incredible facility. If you haven't seen it, go take a look at it. But we need to do more of that. The entrepreneurship, for all the talk, yes, there is an economic crisis on the island. But you know what there isn't a crisis of? Entrepreneurial spirit. The amazing work that is happening on the ground with individuals who are starting new businesses, who are trying to create new initiatives, and whether it's social service oriented or whether it's business oriented, what can we do? Go help one of them. Introduce them to a funder. Send them a contribution. And Encuentro with young people, you want to help him, Jose Luis, continue to grow, find out how we can help sponsor more students to be a part of El Encuentro Puerto Rico. Because this engagement can't be done in silos. We can't be so obtuse to think that we're the ones that know better for everybody in Puerto Rico. And we can't be so disrespectful as to go down there and say, esto es lo que ustedes tienen que hacer. Hay que escuchar qué es lo que se quiere, qué es lo que se necesita, cómo te ayuda. And that can be done in a respectful way. But there are so many other avenues of empowerment, and something Norman said must be kept as a priority. We can't help unless we are in a good position ourselves. So no es egoísta decir, mira, yo me tengo que empoderar también, o tengo que tener mi familia bien, mi comunidad bien, y después yo voy a ayudar. That's good. And you know what? If you want to help the Puerto Rican community, help your neighbors in your local communities. Create that stability so that we could do more. In New York, we were lucky and fortunate that we had a political structure that somebody like Governor Cuomo was able to listen to and tap into and get advice from on how to do the work that we were able to do. And we're really proud of the work we did. But so much more of that can be done if we take that model and empower Pennsylvania leadership and other states' leaderships in order to do the same or to create those mechanisms. There is an avenue for everyone in this room to be a part of that. And for those of you who have done it for years, for those of you who have said, who are thinking right now, eso es lo que hicimos en mi época de juventud. Si usted tiene esa experiencia, yo le imploro que se comunique con José Luis, con la juventud, y comparta los errores más que las cosas positivas que hicieron. compartan las equivocaciones, compartan las desilusiones que han vivido para que ellos entiendan lo que van a confrontar, porque no hay nada nuevo bajo el sol. Esta generación va a sufrir también sus altas y bajas mientras que crean este movimiento. So we all have a responsibility to help them with that. And so, and I know that sometimes we get too lost in this conversation about, oh, well, young people don't think that they know or they don't listen to us. Don't let that blind you. You know, we all hear it from our kids. I don't know about you. I hear it from I have a 19-year-old in college. And every time I tell her something, I tú no me entiende. No, I do. I was there the other day. I'm not that old. But in their mind, I was born this age and I never lived her life. It's amazing. And as young people, we have to remind them too, they have to take the time to really pay attention to the lessons of the past. And not to think that they're the only ones with energy and passion for what they want to accomplish. Too much of that is creeping into our politics, and we have to find a way to bring it back. Now, let me get to some of the questions. Here's how we're going to try to do this, because there are plenty, and I'm not sure how much time we have. All right, so what I want to do is this. I know that there is a million comments we could each make about each of these questions, but what I'm going to do is, I'm going to throw the question out, and I'm going to ask one of the panelists to take a stab at it so we can move on to the next one. And by the way, if you're intrigued or left with avoid, stay engaged the rest of after the panel and the rest of the afternoon of the weekend, because there'll be a chance to elaborate on that. And in no particular order, what efforts are being made to make sure all Puerto Ricans vote? I know we talked about this a little bit, and I don't know if anybody has a perspective from one of those states that's in play more so than maybe New York, but who wants to take a stab at this one?
You know, I was hoping for Florida because it's becoming the largest Puerto Rican community, and New Yorkers don't like to hear that, but it's the case. You know, in Pennsylvania, we are really working with our Pennsylvania Department of State, making sure that we are bringing the secretary to the conversation. The governor appointed the Secretary of Education for Pennsylvania, the Secretary of Aging of Pennsylvania, are both Puerto Ricans. So we are getting them engaged in the engagement process, in motivating the Puerto Rican community to be, engaged and to get out and vote. So those are some of the various things that we are doing, including the Pennsylvania Latino Convention that is going to be the driving force behind a collective, cohesive voter registration campaign for the Puerto Rican community.
¿Cómo se llamaba la campaña que Nidia creó? Atrévete. Se habló durante las campañas del 2016, se habló mucho de la movilización del voto puertorriqueño. Se movilizó, sí, más de lo que muchos dieron crédito. But we could do so much more, and I would hope that we could begin to talk about a new generation's Atrévete campaign to mobilize that a little bit further. This question, I'll take a stab at, is the Democratic Party taking Puerto Ricans for granted? How can Puerto Ricans make themselves matter outside of Florida? So as a chair of the Democratic Party in the Bronx, a community that is considered a stronghold for Puerto Rican elected officials, let me tell you the answer is yes, but not just Democrats. Everybody takes us for granted. Y si nosotros no nos empezamos a unir, and if we don't start to put aside our petty political local differences, and me included, because I've had these encounters where there are other Puerto Rican leaders I haven't seen eye to eye politically on issues, but there should be room, despite those differences, to get in a room and say, cuando se trata de Puerto Rico, lo demás no importa. Y cuando se trata de un common ground, hay que buscarlo, aunque tú no consigas todo lo que tú quieres, ni yo lo que yo quiero. Pero ese es para mí, for me, that's the trick. We all have to be willing to cave and find middle ground. If not, if we just draw lines in the sand and say extremism, I don't know about you, but I haven't seen a time in history where extremism has necessarily been sustained. It has forced change and conversation, but it's also, I think we need to find a way to start coming together. And if you look at the Democratic Party, yes, after Maria, candidates are talking about what happened in Puerto Rico, but Democratic leaders across this country, and I'm talking about Latino leaders across this country, Mexican American leadership, the Cuban American leadership, in my opinion, could have done and should have done a lot more to come with those Puerto Ricans that mobilized to Washington, D.C., to draw lines in the sand to say, we're not gonna let you do this. We have states where we can make a political impact right away, but there are others where we need coalitions in order to get us there. So we need to get back to building those coalitions. It only starts if those of us that have petty differences can come together when it matters on the issues of Puerto Rico. And there's the last question here that I'm gonna get to. that I'm gonna circle back to this, so I'm really intrigued with that.
Before you do that,
No, it's
as you
sir,
define-
there's a process. Sir, please, please, please.
I'll try to get that. I'll come back to that. Let me get to something not New York centric. If we are to get rid of the abuse, neglect, and racism that affects Puerto Ricans, we will have to address this within ourselves as Puerto Rican communities. How do you think we can approach this? Maritza.
So I'm gonna go back to my feminist self, right? As a Puerto Rican woman growing up in a neighborhood that we would put aside and not listen to. What Crespo said about community organizing and agencies, that's how I started. I started in a not-for-profit agency that there was only 10 of us. And the purpose of that organization was to go out and talk to people, create organizations, create an educational system that was productive for us. How do we continue to do this? Again, and Crespo mentioned something. We have a new set or group of people that feel that they can do things in a socialist way, right? I'm a democratic socialist, I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative, I'm a Green Party, this, all these different parties. And what are they looking for? They're looking for social justice. The same things that we go through, the same things that we had to climb out of in order to make a difference. And so therefore, we have to start talking to people in the younger generation that it's okay to tell your story. It's your story. People connect to that. But don't let anyone else tell you how you should move forward in running for office. And don't be ashamed. And they're going to try to put you in corners. We should never let that happen. Tell your story. Don't be afraid of it. Because that's what people want to hear. That someone real is there doing the job. Not because we get paid so much money. We don't. But because we truly care. So social justice is one of those big components that are very much needed. And people need to tell their stories. That's all.
Appreciate that. How has the Puerto Rican diaspora engaged with the communities on the island? What is happening in the Bronx, Brooklyn, Pennsylvania, Florida to help communities in Puerto Rico? I can take a stab at that one actually. A couple of years back, actually a few years ago, during a visit to Puerto Rico with Governor Colón, Nydia, several leaders, we had a conversation with the governor. And Governor Colón, one idea was, look, the conference is a great gathering, but we need a sustained effort of connecting our markets. This is before Maria, this is the economic crisis was the topic of conversation. What did we do? We opened the New York office in San Juan. And Betty Enriquez, who's running that office, has been able to engage Puerto Rican businesses with the New York market. We took, I believe one of the initial efforts was 3 Puerto Rican companies, a rice company, a coffee company, and one other product, and make them approved vendors in our WIC program and get them into our supermarkets. It increased their sales and helped their productivity and gains, created more jobs. Vice versa, we were able to then help Puerto Rican buyers to start getting fruits and vegetables from New York produce growers, from growers in New York and farmers in New York. So it was an economic exchange, and it's an initiative and an office funded by the state of New York, and there were people saying, pero que están gastando dinero en Puerto Rico, because it's helping New York farmers and New York businesses also. But that economic exchange is one example of that. Also, if you went to Somos last year, for example, and I know Maritza is continuing with this effort of the expo, the business expo. We're not there just to have political discussions. We understand that there has to be support of on-the-ground organizations. And the purpose of the expo is we're bringing 1,200 political and business leaders, investors, and others to Puerto Rico who are there to politic. Bueno, si estás aquí, I'm going to introduce you to some businesses, some opportunities, some growing industries, and look at opportunities to invest and help those businesses on the island that are Puerto Rican companies grow. So there has been a lot of that effort, but like I said earlier, Everybody can be a part of that because in the social service sector, in the engagement sector, in the political world, and in the business world, there are so many homegrown and grassroots organizations and businesses propping up all over the island. It will not take you a long search to identify somebody that you can go ahead and support. So there is a lot of that happening. Based on the fact that many people were not aware that we are U.S. citizens, the question is, how is the New York public education system, and I'm sure this is open to other states as well, mentioning the history of Puerto Rico with the United States?
You know, if I may, there are a few things that we need to really be truthful to ourselves. First, you know, as the son of an Afro-Puerto Rican woman, you know, my mother, going back to the previous question, and then I will get to the last one, we need to recognize that, you know, if you go to the island or to many Puerto Rican communities in the United States and you ask them, are you white, black? Most of us, we mark as white. Come on, let's be real. There is nothing more beautiful than our race, than our culture, than being Puerto Rican, but we are not white. So we have to recognize the strong African influence in everything and in anything that we are and that we aspire to be. It is in our food, it is in our dances, it is in our history. So we have to recognize that here and in Puerto Rico. And the second question, I forgot. I get too passionate about this.
Educational system. How are we educating more Americans and our communities in general about Puerto Rico's history and our involvement with the United States and our citizenship status?
Well, once again, we have to hold educational system and educational leaders accountable, and especially because before we had a Martin Luther King, we have Pedro Albizu Campos, we have a Ramón Emeterio Betances, we have a Eugenio María de Hostos. You know, before we had any of the leaders that are the social justice leaders of the United States, we already had them in Puerto Rico. So it's up to us to make sure that the educational system recognizes. And you know, this is something that we are even changing, and I hope that we are not hurting any political feelings of anyone. If Puerto Rico is part of what is the United States now, right? We're a territory, we're a colony, we are whatever you want to call it. If we are part of what is the United States now, today, then we have to change the narrative. So the oldest city in what is now the United States of America, what is it? San Juan, Puerto Rico. What is now the United States. So when we are doing a lot of tourism, you know, visit Puerto Rico, visit San Juan, no, let's change that. Porque a los gringos les encanta eso. Come and visit the oldest city in what is now the United States of America, and that is San Juan of Puerto Rico. You know, those are the changes that we need to inject, even you know, Puerto Rican leaders in the United States.
Yeah, curriculum. If you want to learn a little bit more about those efforts, look no further than Centro and the Cultural Ambassador Program that the Centro has created. It is an incredible tool. It is open and available. I know Raquel and others are here who are part of creating that, but understand this, there are so many mechanisms to help support the education and the empowerment of that, learning that history. It doesn't matter if you grew up in the diaspora and don't feel as connected, or somebody said something to you that made you feel bad about being de afuera, but the reality is that there are so many avenues to find that information and to learn more about our culture. We need to do so much more work in that regard. Next question. The Bronx is the center of Puerto Rican political power, followed by Brooklyn. Nationally, Florida is ascendant. What efforts, I didn't say that, Maritza, just read it. What efforts are being made? Esta es mi jefa. What efforts are being made to create a national Puerto Rican political coalition? Chacho, nadie quiere contestar eso. Well, look, efforts, there are plenty. Are they working? Not as much. Is it Trump's fault? No, it's us on that one. And again, we're always going to have differences. There's going to be questions that we can't come to terms with. right? And I'm gonna leave that one for the end, the big status. Pero hay mucho más que nos une que lo que nos separa. Y yo creo que tenemos que enfocarnos en eso lo más posible, en mi opinión. But in terms of political coalitions, there can be none if it doesn't start with the next generation. So I would like Jose Luis to maybe tell us a little bit more about, and I know you guys, you mentioned earlier, you focused on local issues as a form of engagement, but how can the growth of those encuentros and the coalitions and bringing all those groups from different states together, how does that help us create a larger national political movement?
Definitely. I want to showcase 2 case studies. First, starting with DC. Right now, we actually have a very strong leader from DC, Ricardo. He's actually partnering with a lot of community members who are Boricuas Unidos en la Diaspora, among many others. We're actually doing a lot of lobbying, a lot of advocacy work in grassroots organizing for registering people to vote, making those calls, creating awareness about policy issues. So definitely, we're seeing how the youth is getting engaged in that end, and how important it is to inject that passion, empower and maximize social media. And from the DC part, that's essential. And then Orlando, at least, what we've seen is that more and more Puerto Ricans are getting organized. More organizations are coming to birth, and we're coming together, supporting each other, bringing resources together, and how the youth is actually getting so involved in learning about the priority and how important it is that we are the driving state of Puerto Rican population and nation, and how key we are as the swing state for the presidential election coming 2020.
I just wanted to mention very quickly that there is a National Puerto Rican Caucus. It's run by a senator from Puerto Rico called Carmelo Rios. And so if you need more information, you should definitely Google it if you want to be part of it. I happen to be the vice chair of the Housing and Banking Committee. So yeah, you should look it up and maybe start putting some more pressure on us so that we can start listening and engaging with everyone throughout the entire nation. Thank you.
We really have time for one more, but I want to squeeze this one in really quickly, and I'm going to ask Norman to just give us a really quick answer to this. What are folks doing about communicating the importance of Puerto Rican diaspora responding to and participating in the 2020 census before the elections and getting involved in voting? Census is the basis of the democratic process, informs power and funding. You want to elaborate a little bit on?
I think that we are, in Census 2020 is going to be priority number 1 next year. The first half of the year, Census is going to be the number 1 priority. The second half of the year is getting Trump out of the White House, right?
Yeah.
So we are clear. In counting on the census, I think that this is an amazing opportunity for the Puerto Rican communities and allies to get engaged in counting every single individual in communities like the Bronx and Brooklyn and Philadelphia and Orlando. For example, in Pennsylvania, we have been very research driven, and we know that for every single Puerto Rican that we count in Pennsylvania, that is $2,093 that come back to the state every year. For 10 years, we know that it's $2,930 that Puerto Rican is investing and injecting in the Pennsylvania economy. So I know that, at least for my state, we are getting ready to count, especially those Puerto Ricans that are moving in from the island. Because when I make the case to the House, to the Senate, and to the governor's office, I want to show real numbers. So when we are demanding for the House and the Senate to make decisions on behalf of the Puerto Rican people, we also know what we are bringing back to the state. So let's make sure, once again, that priority number 1, we are counting every single individual, whether they are undocumented U.S. citizens, if they moved to Puerto Rico, to the United States just recently, or they have been here forever, whether it is a kid that is 1 day old or a 100 years old person, let's count every single Latino. Because then we can go back, and in this case, every single Puerto Rican, we can go back and demand, because the numbers, and that's the beauty about the numbers, and I know that Ed will love this because he's an economist and a professor. Numbers don't lie. Some people try to manipulate them, But once we got the real numbers, we can go back and say, this is my community's investment in your community and all across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in this case, and all across the nation.
So we're running out of time, but I do want to get to this last question. There were a couple of others we did not get to, and I apologize, but if those that did not get their question asked, please come see us right after on stage, and I do want to answer your question in a minute. But this one, how is it possible to discuss the many problems confronting Puerto Rico without discussing the colonial status of Puerto Rico and the need to develop a 21st century economy in the context of a sovereign state? When I say that we have to learn to come together despite strong opinions and difference of opinion, let's be honest. This has been the #1 contentious issue amongst our communities, and there are people in this room who share a variety of views of what that answer should be in terms of status, as well as the pathway to create change if it's needed, etc. And it has always been a contentious discussion. But I think two things are incredibly important, and I want the other panelists to chime in on this one, just giving you my 2 cents. At the end of the day, what I see every day when I get up and go to Albany is that whether or not the issues that I'm introducing or that I feel are vital to the interests of my neighborhood pass or not, there are a thousand other issues that I have to vote on. There are 1,000 other decisions the governor is making and the mayor and other leaders, and there is the day-to-day life that continues to happen affecting my family, my neighbors, my constituents. I say that because, yes, I truly believe that at the heart of many of our issues, and all of our issues, is the issue of status, and we should not shy away from an exchange of those ideas and having that conversation. But it cannot be so that we get in a room and simply because we identify from a different perspective on that issue, that we can no longer stay in that room and we can no longer talk about everything else that continues to happen. While we debate and or create a pathway for that change, decisions are being made in Washington, the president keeps disrespecting us, congressional officials keep ignoring it, and we are where we are, and it's been this way for too long. So we need to start coming back together and having conversations about everything else and what we need to do, while we still acknowledge amongst ourselves that we have to continue this conversation and learning more about the right pathways or the possible pathways towards some change. One other brief little comment before I forget. We talked about the nonprofits and the political organizations. Do not forget our churches. Do not forget the power of the faith-based community. And if you went to Puerto Rico in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, and you ask yourself, cuando el gobierno no pudo responder, cuando los centros no se abrieron, los centros de distribución, cuando hubieron todos esos problemas, you know who had their doors open, took people in, and became the hub of organizing for a variety of organizations, including those that did not believe in the faith? It was the churches. And so, if you look at every social major movement in this country, it has involved the leadership of the faith-based community. So regardless of how we feel about religion or religious organizations or some religious leaders, the fact of the matter is that as institutions, they are key partners in our efforts. You can't talk about anti-poverty measures without getting to churches. So why should we shy away from them when it comes to other issues? Just wanted to make sure. But I want everybody else to chime in on this very briefly, your perspective on how have you done your work with or without this question of status, or what do you think the challenges in dealing with status?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly jump in and tell you a story of the youth of Puerto Rico. We were born and raised within a crisis. You know, we've seen how difficult it is for us to look back, especially from the diaspora, and see, I'm getting education, I'm getting so many opportunities. How am I going to look back and convince myself that I'm going to get a job, get good salaries, and be able to be prosperous within my life? Those are the key challenges that we face. So we, as the youth, we understand that we all have our opinion about the status, that's a fact. But we know that we have more that unifies us, and that's what we want to, how we want to transform Puerto Rico, how we want to build the future of Puerto Rico. And we know that's in our hands, and that's how we learn from our seniors, our peers, and how we all work together towards the same goal, and that's rebuilding Puerto Rico.
You know, the status question have always been and will be part of who we are. However, for the past 100 years, we continue asking this question and this relationship with the United States. Yet, we continue forgetting on making improvement in our own communities. Let's take a closer look at the Bronx. And I'm sorry that is your place, and I am from Pennsylvania, but I'm looking from the outside world. The Puerto Rican community of the Bronx, to some extent, have been displaced or replaced. The businesses are no longer the bodega owners that I used to visiting the Puerto Rican parade many years ago. If you go to Brooklyn and Williamsburg and that area, now the high-rises are replacing the formerly owned Puerto Rican homes. In the city of Philadelphia, it's happening the same case. In Boston, and in Holyoke, and in Springfield, and in every single Puerto Rican community, just because we have forgotten to fight for the daily issues that are confronting our community, and we concentrate on what is dividing us more, which is...
Excuse me, ma'am, please.
So, you know, the issue of the status of Puerto Rico, and I was born, raised, and educated in the island, so I know it very well. I know how it impacts my own family every single day, positively or negatively. I have family members that are on the 3 major political parties. But when we are dealing with the issues of Puerto Rico, that are issues between life or death, going to bed hungry, or having a place and decency and dignity for the Puerto Rican community in my hometown, you know what, ladies and gentlemen? I would rather fight on a daily basis to make sure that my Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania get dignity and respect every day, rather than talking about the status that to some extent don't have any impact on my own Puerto Rican community in Pennsylvania. And that's true. And the issue of the status, to some extent, I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm going to give you my opinion. As a person that was born and raised in the island, that is the full responsibility of those Puerto Ricans that are living in the island today. I believe that. Even when, you know, I was born, raised, educated, my family is there, I have my home there, those that are in the island right now are the ones suffering on a daily basis. So it's up to them to decide. It is our responsibility to help them, to guide them, to support them, to vote for those members of Congress in or out that are creating all these issues in Puerto Rico. But our main concern should be to improve our local Puerto Rican communities so we can extend the help to the island and to many other places. That's what I feel.
So I heard a lot about gentrification in Bushwick and Williamsburg, and I heard you. But I have to tell you that about 25 years ago, we saw it coming as Puerto Ricans. So we took on a lot of HPD land and built 100% affordable housing. So what does that mean? That means that we see it. By mistake and by God's will, I was in Puerto Rico for the manifestation because I was working on the Somos conference. And I said to myself, I need to go in there. I want to see what's going on. The amount of young people that I saw on horses, on motorcycles, on cars. I mean, at that point, at that point, there was no other party. It was just one party, the Puerto Rican Party. That's all it was. And if we don't nurture that, and we don't start talking to our Puertorriqueños in Puerto Rico as well as here, because everybody saw it, that we were the #1 place in the entire world that can teach someone how to take someone out of office. We were the only ones that were able to do that. So let us not get confused that we are separated in one way or another. There's a party. When it's time to come together, we will. And we need our youth to lead that, because that's what I saw. And I was extremely proud to be Puerto Rican that day. That's all I have to say. Let our youth pave the way, because they took the governor out. Now it's time for them to rebuild Puerto Rico. We have to make sure that the Puerto Ricans here understand that we must stay together. There is no separation. That's all. Somos puertorriqueños. Si no ahora, ¿cuándo?
Otra, Maritza. Dilo otra vez. I wanted to just, two quick things as we close down. Just to answer your question, in my opinion of extremism and what I'm seeing politically is the inability to come into a room and actually have an exchange of ideas that aren't based on initial threats. Meaning that too many people are saying, if you're not with me 120% of the time, then I don't believe that you can coexist with me. And politically that's happening. Now look, mi esposo y yo estamos juntos, tenemos 3 nenas y no compartimos todas las mismas ideas. Pero ahí estamos. And I say that because as Puerto Ricans we have seen the strength of other communities has always been that they will fight in a room amongst themselves but walk out as a unified front. And I would like to see us be able to do that much more often than not. I'm going to include myself in that because I'm not going to sit here and tell you that politically I've always practiced been able to practice that. We find ourselves in these tension situations, particularly when I'm in an environment where all of us are either Puerto Rican or aligned with Puerto Rican interests. And we're going to have those infights. But at the end of the day, extremism, what's happening today, is the inability to get in a room and have an actual conversation where we agree, and none of us are going to walk away with everything we want, but we're going to find the solution that might provide the best answer. And I would like to see more people, more leaders come with that approach as opposed to too many lines in the sand. That's my concern. It's not about a specific policy issue or political position, because again, I think when it comes to those even, by and large, we share more in common than not. But look, when you look at Trump, and we all agree the disrespect we got from him, his administration, but how many Latinos, including Puerto Ricans, continue to support his campaign? So there's so much for us to discuss, to dissect, but it can't happen, and that conversation can't take place without us coming together. Muchas gracias. Un fuerte aplauso al panel. Y un aplauso aún más fuerte para Edwin y el equipo de